But there was one consequential moment and might have opened the door for biblical Christians to see much more clearly the heinousness of what Mahler is promoting. Hi, and welcome back to Wisdom for the Church. I am John. We will go ahead and get back into it. This episode is going to be one of my more serious ones. It involves a small but growing movement, I believe, and way of thinking in some churches that has a white supremacist strain to it, and that is being best articulated in terms of those views by Stone Choir podcast leader, a Lutheran named Corey Mahler. And I wanted to give my thoughts on the whole situation, as well as tie it into a recent debate that I saw between Mahler and a Reformed blogger named Samuel Say. And so we'll go ahead and get into it. So what I'll do in this video are just a few things. Number one, I wanted to describe what I believe to be Corey's views. Number two, I want to give a brief note on a theory that I have on debate in general. Number three, I did want to highlight what I believe are Corey's strengths in terms of when he gets into scuffles and debates and what to think about and watch out for. And number four, I wanted to give basically what I believe was the absolute consequential moment in the debate, and then my thoughts on this whole set of ideas going forward. So from what I can tell, Corey Mahler and those who basically follow him or think that he has good ideas overall, they're promoting a set of ideas that white people, particularly over black people, have a moral and intellectual superiority. So it is a technically white supremacist way of thinking. And the two reasons from what I can tell that Corey gives for this conclusion are, number one, the alleged curse of Ham in Genesis 9. And number two, what he believes is how history has actually played out the last few thousand years. And when I say that, I mean, moral degradation in African countries, for example, he would point to the lack of social advancement in the African race, as he would point out, as well as things like violent crime and educational lack of progress as well. So what he would describe is look at history and see overall how the African race has done worse and has had more intellectual and moral degradation. And so they're showing a lower kind of plane of being in the image of God as it's actually applied. And so people have begun to follow and take notice of Corey. Some think that his views are brilliant and to be celebrated, and they're addressing topics that wouldn't be addressed in our common day, but others are seeing massive problems and moral evil to them. And so that's why he's getting so much traction, is he is a very polarizing figure, which leads to him having a growing public profile, and these couple of debates, at least the two that I've seen that he has, gaining a lot of traction, and he's only getting bigger and having a sort of brighter star. So I wanted to make one note that I believe to be true about debate, particularly public debate in terms of more formal debate. From what I have seen with arguments and debate in my life is typically preparedness, experience, and intelligence. Those three ingredients. Preparedness, particularly experience and argumentation, as well as just simple intelligence, a lot of times determine who is the winner of a debate. And those are all three very good qualities, by the way. But the thing about debate is you may have those three qualities, but it doesn't ensure that you are actually right. You may win the debate, but winning a debate doesn't mean you are actually right. For example, if Neil deGrasse Tyson, the scientist, were to debate 10 maybe local pastors here in the southeast United States or something about astrophysics and its proof or lack thereof of the existence of God, and I believe he's an atheist or agnostic, I bet that Tyson would actually win 8 of those debates. And that's not because his premise that there is no God is correct. It's simply because he is a very intelligent man, very learned man in his field. And a lot of those pastors, unfortunately, would be simply batting above their pay grade. And so I think that can be true applied to a debate like this between Samuel Say and Mahler, or the guy from Fighting for the Faith and Mahler. Mahler is a very intelligent man. I think his views are morally reprehensible and terrible. I think his soul is in grave danger, and he's leading people into grave danger. There's a millstone sort of reality here. He's helping them fall down to the depths of the sea, as we see in the Gospels. But that's not to degrade his intelligence. He's a very intelligent guy. And so a lot of times, if I'm honest, I think he comes out as, if at worst, a tie in these debates, and at best, he's actually won. And again, not because he's right, but because debate is often about who has the best preparation, the most experience, and then, honestly, the more intelligent person has a huge advantage. That being said, I did want to highlight what I believe are Corey's strengths in terms of what I see in his debate profile and why I think his views are getting more and more traction, both in his podcast, but also as he becomes more public in terms of rubbing shoulders with other people. What I believe are his strengths. I've already mentioned his intelligence. Another thing that I think works in his favor is that he is very calm and cerebral. I don't believe that he wastes a lot of words, and I don't believe that he overreacts to something that his opponent will say. And that works a lot and is valuable, especially in our day and age. You think about the vice presidential debate between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. Just a few months ago, Vance basically wiped the floor with Walz. And a big part of that was simply Vance's persona, his self-control, his ability to articulate, and basically being someone that seemed confident and competent. And that goes a long way, and I believe that Corey does have those traits of being cerebral, calm, not overreactive, and that speaks a lot to especially men who live in a very feminized culture where men often fly off the handle, not as they should, but because they've been brought up in this overly effeminate way of doing things. I also think, if I have to be honest, that there are some things that Corey says that are very true and even profoundly true that some people are not willing to talk about or can't articulate or don't even necessarily understand. So I think that also, again, with his intelligence, works in his favor. Just one example of that is the fact that Corey articulates, though his foundational reason for it I absolutely disagree with, he articulates things such as sin showing itself up differently in different ethnicities and in different places. So he acknowledges that reality. Meaning he acknowledges, for example, the reality that in some ethnic groups, violent crime manifests itself at a much higher rate than others. His reasoning why, I believe, goes back to a flawed premise of basically ethnic determinism or racial determinism, but he at least recognizes things that are going on in reality, and I believe that works to his favor because there is a profound sort of truth to some of what he says. And so because of these factors with Corey specifically, his cerebral nature, his intelligence, his ability to articulate real and true things, though I think his premises are terrible oftentimes, and I think he does sprinkle in a lot of falsehoods there as well, of course. I think those factors about him make him very attractive and make his viewpoints very attractive. And so basically what I'm saying is I'm not here to underestimate Mr. Mahler in any of these regards, even though I think he's in trouble. I think he's probably not a brother in the Lord, but he is very intelligent and he is to be watched out for. That being said, I think it did take a lot of courage for Samuel, particularly, to go on a public YouTube channel and debate Corey Mahler because, Samuel is someone who is seen really technically by those sorts of people as Mahler as morally and intellectually inferior. And I think Samuel probably would admit that he has not studied, the Curse of Ham, for example, as in-depth as someone who bases his entire way of thinking like Corey has. And so given that, I think Sam did as well as a job as he could have in representing the truth, biblical truth, Christ's gospel. But there was one consequential moment, the moment that I believe will become consequential in this debate and might have opened the door for biblical Christians to see much more clearly the heinousness of what Mahler is promoting. was seen, I think, toward the end of the debate, where Samuel Say asks essentially to Corey, can black people be as holy as white people? Can black people be as holy as white people? And Corey, being honest, simply said, essentially, not this side of heaven. So in eternity, yes, basically, he answered, but not here on earth. And the reason that I believe this moment will be consequential is probably most people who have only recently taken an interest in Stone Choir podcast, that is Corey's podcast, and those who are opposing it and this kind of viewpoint, they have probably not really listened to a lot of what Corey has to say. So a lot of what he is saying is new, but this was him essentially saying the quiet part out loud to them and the mask being taken off a lot more, in terms of, if Corey had not said that in this debate, I don't know if a lot of people would really realize the extent to which he believes particularly black people are cursed and white people are allegedly morally and intellectually and even spiritually superior to them. And so they would not have seen just the hatred for fellow image bearers on full display that was brought out. And so I thought that that was a great question. Wanted to give credit where credit is due that Samuel asked. It took a lot of courage to come on a YouTube channel and debate him. And though they went in a lot of different directions, and though, because Corey is so intelligent and very studied, it is hard to keep up with him, I thought that question was a great thing that Samuel put in there. Probably the best question that was asked in the entire debate. And so given all that, I wanted to give my thoughts on this whole matter, this whole way of thinking. And I wanted to articulate the fact that when we're talking about ethnicity and unity among the people of God, and in general, even just in society, I believe that there are two ditches that we tend to fall into. And the first ditch, I believe, in more recent years, particularly with social justice and wokeness, is the more primary ditch that we've fallen into, and that is particularly ethnic idolatry. I think that has been the biggest one that's been promoted over the last 7-8 years. So social justice absolutely was ethnic idolatry. There was a different standard for how white people were viewed as being able to understand things or not understand them. There was a different way that white people were seen spiritually, and their ability or lack thereof to be sanctified in the area of understanding things of race and culture and ethnicity was laughably degrading to white people. That's what social justice essentially is. It is anti-whiteness pretending to be about justice. It is partiality and prejudice pretending to be anti-racism. And so ethnic idolatry all over the place. In wokeness and social justice. The way that people who were social justice minded would describe people, quote unquote, people of color as black and brown bodies on the street is simply, one, weird, and two, it made me think, just go get a room. By the end of it all, 2020, 2021, I just thought, get a room. You talk about these brown and black bodies. I don't even know what you're talking about. You have such a flawed and partial and prejudiced and racist, if we're going to call it that, standard. So ethnic partiality, ethnic idolatry, and that is the ditch that Mahler falls into, an ethnic idolatry of, in this case, the quote-unquote white race. I believe that the other ditch that we fall into is completely flatlining ethnicity as if it does not matter at all. And when I say that, I am not talking about what justifies us before God. You or I are not justified in any way, shape, or form by our either sexuality, by our age, or by our ethnicity. There is no more spiritual benefit to being white than there is to being non-white or black or Hispanic or whatever, and vice versa. We are all sinners before God. So that is true in terms of what justifies us before God. In terms of a nation and in terms of people gathering and understanding and having a common language and culture and shared history and food that they like and all these types of things, I believe there is an error where we tend to flatline those things out of guarding ourselves from ethnic idolatry, which is a good instinct. But in guarding ourselves, I think we underestimate the fact that God has made unique cultures and that there is a beautiful thing in that, in ways that people particularly express the image of God in their unique context. For example, if I travel to China, it is a very good thing. It is a beautiful thing, a God-honoring thing that they have a particular language, that they have a particular set of customs regarding honor and shame that keeps the family linked closely, though it can be taken too far, obviously. There's a beauty in that they have a particular food palette that they cook with and they promote. And so to flatline those things as if they don't matter, I think is just going too far, and it does not acknowledge the reality that God has put us in, that is a good reality, that is based on God's order. And so those are the two ditches that I believe we just have to avoid as Christians. Ethnic idolatry, that is both white supremacy and wokeness or social justice, as well as the other ditch, which is simply flatlining and just saying constantly that race doesn't matter, race doesn't matter. Of course it doesn't, in the sense that it does not make us any ontologically better than one another, but in space-time reality, it is something that affects us and is a part of us. And we should actually take care to understand how God has made us. Regarding the curse of Ham, I don't know much, so I'm not going to really speak on that as much as some people will. But what I will say is, based on my knowledge of the New Testament, I don't see that any sort of ethnic or racial curse keeps someone from becoming right with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, or even if they do know Christ, becoming less holy than someone else. I don't see that being a standard in the New Testament. I see churches that are both Jew and Gentile. I see both Jew and Gentile as being justified by God, not by works, but by faith, not by works of the law, but by faith. And I don't see there being any different standard between those two groups. And in fact, I think what's revealed is that overall, we'll see people in the New Testament, such as Peter, be surprised by the fact that God is blessing the Gentiles coming to faith. And so he is tearing down that wall of hostility, to quote Ephesians 2, that divided them. And I really do believe that that applies. I know that's talking about Jew and Gentile, not white and black, but I believe that principle does apply more broadly to essentially just all people. There is benefit to being someone of a certain race or ethnicity, like the Jews, for example, had the law. But those things do not affect their ability upon coming to Christ to grow more or less holy than another brother. And so I believe that someone who's black, for example, like a Vodi Bakum, for example, can be just as holy and sanctified, and sometimes more so, depending on his maturity, than like a white brother or sister. I don't believe that Corey is correct in that. I think that's a reprehensible view. And where I see things going is, prayerfully, people will take note of that debate and take note of particularly the section that I highlighted, which I'll try to maybe link in the description or something, for them to watch and see that this is a poisonous idea that is basic ethnic superiority and ethnic partiality, and is a marring of the image of God. And so watch out for this line of thinking. Do not fall to this ditch over here of ethnic idolatry. Do not fall into the stupidity of saying that, well, none of it matters at all, because then you're simply not honoring the way that God has made someone. But be biblical. Be biblical in all that you do, and I pray that this was helpful.